Well, good morning. Let me begin and tell you what I'm not. I'm not a physician, and I'm a policy wonk. As Errol explained, I've been a policy advocate for most of my professional career and a regulator. I was a commissioner of health and active in that area, and kind of got involved in marijuana, kicking and screaming. My view originally of marijuana looked like that. Is a good example of the public health view of marijuana, probably as recently as 3 or 4 years ago. Marijuana, so I'm going to talk about marijuana, where it came from, the evolution of it as a policy matter, and then we'll get into some of the specifics as we move along. Because it's been quite a journey. Ironically, the journey started a very long time ago. This is today, and this is 3000 BC. We've been using marijuana for all of that time. It's not such a strange drug to us. Trying to figure out what changes these slides. There we go. You can see this. This is from the early 1900s, when it was, you notice USP, it was in the United States Pharmacopoeia. It was a drug that you could get over the counter in a drugstore. Same thing here. As a matter of fact, these are the companies that actually produce marijuana. They all have patents in marijuana. People don't realize that. This drug was very much mainstream until we decided to tax it. And we put a stamp tax on it. And that action resulted in the government scheduling marijuana and classifying the drug. And in this case, marijuana was scheduled as Schedule 1. That puts marijuana in the same category as heroin, psilocybin, the effect from mushrooms, LSD, was considered a category of drugs with no legitimate medical use. What this caused was every medical organization to back off and say, we can't touch this drug, it's not safe. It's still a problem today that people are very nervous about encouraging patients to try marijuana. The other, of course, side effect of this is that second category drugs, morphine, cocaine, are drugs that are considered to have some legitimate medical use. And if we were in that category, we would be allowed to do research on marijuana and find out some facts about marijuana and its impact on patients. So when people ask me, I get it all the time, what's the best strain, what's the best use for my particular problem? The folks that work in my dispensary, and I'll talk about that in a minute, are using their best judgment based on the experience of patients. So it's really clinical, patient outcome based, because we can't do double-blind research because it's a Schedule 1 drug. It's still illegal federally. I remind my wife that I commit a federal felony every day. So she was not surprised. So the other consequence of this is this. It's illegal. We got our license a while back in New Jersey, and within a week of us getting our permit and starting to open our dispensary in Egg Harbor, a gentleman who was adhering to Montana law was arrested in a DEA raid, and he served 15 years. He was sentenced to 15 years. The governor, he lost his child, he was a single parent, and the governor commuted his sentence after 5 years in prison. So this is a very strange journey in marijuana. So what really changed things was this young lady. This is Vivian Wilson, and she had a particular syndrome called Dravet syndrome, which is a form of childhood epilepsy. Her parents were very frustrated with her care, but they decided to intervene. And they tried marijuana because they heard about something about a young girl named Charlotte who was having some success with a strain of marijuana that became affectionately known as Charlotte's Web. And they gave, this is the picture of Vivian, about 6 months post her marijuana intervention. Her parents, Brian and Megan Wilson, became strong marijuana advocates. In fact, there is a YouTube, if you're ever interested, see a fight with a friend of mine, Christie, and that's Brian, Vivian's dad on the left, Governor Christie's right, your left. And they had a confrontation at a town hall, which was very aggressive with the governor telling him to back off and finally some troopers intervening. But as a result of, the bad news is the Wilsons left New Jersey, moved to Colorado so they could continue to get care for their child. The good news is that Governor Christie changed his position and we were allowed to provide cannabis to pediatric patients. The other good news was that this case got championed by this guy, Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay Gupta, you all know from CNN, is the doc that's always the spokesperson there. And Dr. Gupta did a special. This is Weed 4. The one if you want to see the original one, it was Weed 1, where he went up and say the title of his report was "Why I Changed My Mind About Marijuana," and it was because of the Wilson case and I forget Charlotte's last name, but the Charlotte case that became the moniker for Charlotte's Web. He became a staunch advocate. He has provided a lot of data in trying to bring this about, change. Now, he isn't the only one. As time changed, people got more interested in marijuana, and it became more popular, and we have a whole bunch of folks that became supportive. We have the Dalai Lama, who spoke in Mexico in favor of cannabis. We have Melissa Etheridge, who actually was a breast cancer survivor. She was actually arrested with marijuana in her possession after one of her tours in Tennessee. Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz, has the best quote when he was accused by an interview with, I believe, Fox News. They asked him, isn't marijuana a gateway drug to narcotics? He says, I believe this is an exit drug to the narcotic epidemic. And there's a good deal of evidence that that's true. Just to go through, Morgan Freeman, fibromyalgia pain, Whoopi Goldberg, glaucoma, and Olivia Newton-John, a breast cancer survivor. All of these folks are active marijuana users for their medical condition, but most importantly, they use their physical notoriety and their star status to advocate for marijuana. Actually, times have really changed because I told you, of course, that this is a federal felony. It's all kinds of problems, but we have even some public people admitting that they use marijuana. They're all confessed pot smokers, every one of them. Some of them even now admit they inhale. But these are causing a change in attitude in America, enough so that I can show you this slide that shows you where marijuana is legal in the United States. The dark green is legalized recreationally and medically, and the light green is where it's legalized medically. So, it's so much support for legalized medical marijuana that Time Magazine devoted a special issue to it, the medical movement marijuana. And if you're really interested in medical marijuana, that is a great source. So let's talk a little bit about New Jersey's story. New Jersey began with 6 alternative treatment centers. They're called ATCs. They're the ones that do not have the red box around them. The one down here in this corner, Compassionate Care, is the ATC that I run in Egg Harbor Township. The ones with the red boxes around them are new. They have been permitted, but they are not yet approved. All of these are vertically integrated. That's buzz speak in marijuana for can you grow, cultivate, can you process, and can you dispense? All of these can do all 3. Going forward, the state will allow people just to dispense or just cultivate or just process. We were the 3rd ATC approved in New Jersey. This gives you an example of how it's utilized statewide. 50,000 patients approved to purchase medical marijuana for their conditions. And you see where it's heavily tied up is in chronic pain, spasticity, PTSD, and anxiety. A special note on PTSD, in our operation in Egg Harbor, we have a lot of veterans. We have a high number of veterans. In fact, if you walked into our dispensary, I can show you what it looks like. If you walk into our dispensary, you would think you're in a doctor's office. That's what it looks like. We were visited by a former United States Surgeon General, came down, wanted to get the handle on this, and would I give him a tour? And I said, of course, knew me from my old regulatory days. And he came in, and he was there for about 2 hours, and then afterwards he took me outside, and he said, Dave, did you set these patients up? Because we had patients coming in wheelchairs, and we had, I said, General, you come back anytime you want unannounced, and you'll see exactly the same thing. We had a photographer down there last week for some website photography that we were doing, and he said, I'd like to get a picture of somebody in a wheelchair so people know that they can use it in that way. And he says, can you send me a text message or something, and I'll come back. And then we said, wait 10 minutes. Somebody will be coming in a wheelchair. So it's much more debilitated. And here's how they split up for us. And what I want to point out is that by and large, if you look at chronic pain, PTSD, cancer pain, and muscular spasticity, it's almost 2/3 of the cases that we see. The governor just recently, Governor Murphy, added New Jersey conditions, as your previous speaker mentioned in Pennsylvania. I do believe, I don't want to contradict your previous speaker, but I think we have one more condition than he has. I think we have 24 total now. The interesting addition was the opioid use disorder, which the commissioner just added. This is to help with withdrawal symptoms. So to give you an idea of some of the problem, in order to get approved to use medicinal marijuana in New Jersey, you have to have a physician authorize you to get use. They don't write a prescription. You can't prescribe something that's illegal, but the doctor would give you permission to use it. Say, you have a condition, I certify that you have a condition that qualifies, that I just went over. The problem in New Jersey has been that 781 physicians is less than 3% of the number of physicians in the state of New Jersey. So the lack of access, the built-up demand for medicinal marijuana is really significant. The problem is physicians are not enrolling. There's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, they think it's a pain in the neck. Number two, they don't understand why they can't prescribe like anything else. Number three, much of marijuana initial utilization is that it's smoked, and it's hard to get a physician to write a prescription for something you smoke. So there's a whole bunch of problems in getting this very large impediment to getting progress in marijuana with physicians. habits. I already told you that. If you look at age, you'd be surprised. I think when I got into this 7 years ago, I said, I'm going to have a bunch of young people in my clinic coming in to get marijuana. Our average age is over 50 in terms of our patients. And people are surprised at that, but it's because of the medicinal aspects and who needs it the most. And 2/3 of them are male. Another thing that surprised me a little bit. I took a look at this issue in two ways. This is, has the patient stopped or lowered the dose of other medications? In our particular dispensary, 58% answer yes to that question, that they have stopped or switched or lowered the dose of other medications. We actually looked at that in the patients with nerve pain. It's almost 70% have stopped or lowered other medications because of cannabis. When you go into a dispensary, this was with nerve pain. If you go into a dispensary, you're going to see a split that looks like this. When I first took this over, I said, I'm a public health professional. I am not going to tell people they can come into my dispensary and get sour banana sherbet. We can call it Zinacane or something, but we're not calling it sour banana. The problem became I had a riot on my hands with the patients who said, the only way I know what works for my migraine or works for my kid is by knowing the particular strain that is used, and I need to know the street name because I'm relying on the internet. I'm relying on the internet to guide me. So we went back to sour banana sherbet, which is, as you can see, in nerve pain is the most popular. Okay, so let me introduce you to some of our patients. One of the reasons I didn't think we'd have enough time, because these are rather lengthy, but we're going to be putting these within the next 2 weeks or so. We'll be putting these full videos up on our web. These are videos. I'm not going to play the video. I'll just go over the case. But they'll be on our website in a couple weeks. The first case is John. John is a cancer patient. He said, I had pancreatic cancer and was on Oxycontin for pain. I didn't like it, so I asked my doc and he suggested marijuana. What I do is after my chemo, when the pain starts, I just take the marijuana, it goes away. That's it. I don't need anything else. There's an interesting case in this particular case. I was interviewed by a Philadelphia television station, and I was interviewed with John. He was on camera before me. I was in the room, but I wasn't on camera. He was on camera. And he did this wonderful interview with this news anchor. Her name was Stephanie. I don't remember her last name. She interviewed him, and he said, what's amazing, he said, I was in the fetal position. I couldn't move, and I got the marijuana, and it's been amazing because now I can hold my grandchild, and I can walk, and I can do all these things. His wife, Gladys, was sitting with him, just tears coming down out of her eyes. And he says, and the most exciting part of it was my tumor shrunk by 50%. So after he's done, they go on me, and Stephanie says, are you ready, Mr. Knowlton? I says, I am, but can I ask the first question? She laughed. She says, I said, are you on tape? She said, yeah, I'm on tape, so you can edit it. I said, okay, because I knew she wouldn't if we were live. And she says, okay, what do you want to ask me? I said, I don't want to ask you, I want to ask me. She says, okay. I said, so Mr. Knowlton, what did you think of John's story? I says, my answer would be, that was amazing. It was wonderful. And I said, but, so my second question would be, what did you think of his 50% reduction in his tumor? And I said, I want to ask John another question. And he said, sure. And I said, did your tumor really shrink by 50%? Oh yeah, the doctor told me and everything else. I said, John, did you do anything else? Yeah, he went back on chemotherapy. What happened was the condition of marijuana allowed him, mitigated the pain. You're not going to continue chemotherapy with a guy in the fetal position who can't move and is almost dead, okay? But with marijuana, and the reporter said, Mr. Knowlton, you just passed up a wonderful opportunity for us to put, my lead was going to be marijuana cures cancer. And I says, yeah, and all the doctors in the state of New Jersey would die laughing. So I want to be clear. And by the way, I don't think helping John cope with chemotherapy is a bad outcome. I think it's a good outcome. He was able to get back to medicine that was helpful to him. Next case, and my favorite. This is Jackie. She has a 9-year-old epileptic son. He had 18 seizures a day, wore a helmet. He never ate his meal at the kitchen table because he fell so often. As my son, she describes, we were desperate. We heard about marijuana and thought we'd try it. This piece right here where she says, my son's teacher called me the other day. She's teary-eyed when she says this. My son's teacher called me the other day to tell me my son was now active and doing well in class. He had not been mainstreamed. He had never been before. He has seizure-free days. This means so much to me as a mom. She's a nurse practitioner. She came into this very skeptical of marijuana and very proud now of what it's done for her son. She's been a fantastic advocate. This is Mariah. She's an Air Force veteran. She had lupus and connective tissue disease. And she says she was taking up to 16 pills a day. She was unable to think. She turned to opioids to deal with the crushing pain, but the side effects were unbearable. We hear that a lot. It's not that that didn't solve the pain, the opioids, but that the side effects are very difficult. So I threw the opiates away and turned to marijuana. I can now function normally. I got married, and I'm hoping to start a family soon. I'll talk to you at the end about a report that we just did and how you can get it. This is Dave and Ashton Mitchell. Ashton was really not moving. He's on the autism spectrum, severe epilepsy. And Dave, after, I think it was 3 days of marijuana, Ashton slept with his legs straight for the first time ever and just completed 9 months seizure-free. He's close to be able to stand on his own. He loves and laughs. It's miraculous. He has been a staunch advocate. Actually, Dave became a patient later when he had chemotherapy for prostate cancer. I can't show you this guy's face, but he is, because you would know him, he's a former NFL player. His former running back, and he is, he's a lineman. He was a lineman. He says, being a lineman in the NFL is like being hit by a truck repeatedly every day. I developed severe neuropathy. The opioids had side effects that were terrible. Marijuana is the only medication that helped me, and I only needed to use it when I had pain. I'm now seizure-free. It has helped me regain my life. I want to point out, I was talking to a large group of physicians one time about this, and a particular physician was being rather aggressive in his opposition to this. And he says, you can't give me one good example of this. And I said, well, I can give you a bunch. But one thing it does do is give patients back control. If you have a severely debilitating illness, one of the first casualties is your control. You are now victim to this terrible whatever. Marijuana is something the patient has much more control over. What they use, when they use it, what happens, because there aren't real risks of overdose. You can get overly high, but it'll go away. And it's a pretty safe drug, and I'll give you the exceptions of that in a minute. This patient is still a patient of ours. And this patient, I say for the last one, because the next one guy I'm going to show you is not a patient, but you may recognize him. This is Tiki Barber. Those of you who like football, Tiki holds the rushing record as a running back in the NFL. He approached me to ask if he could join our foundation that we put together because of the reasons he said here. I have dear friends who have had their lives ruined by the treatment they received after being injured, not insured, injured in the game, The drugs they are given are addictive and compromise their future. I'm committed to changing the NFL prohibition on the medical use of marijuana by injured players. Currently under the NFL, if you leave a game and you're all banged up and bruised up and you drink a quart of scotch and you go out and bust up a bar, you'll get a $5,000 fine, a slap on the wrist. If you test positively for marijuana, you get suspended from a game. If you do it twice, you'll get suspended from 2 games. If you get 3 times, you'll be suspended from the season. That's millions of dollars and career-changing events. So the need, Tiki's been a good friend and a strong advocate. It is a tribute to the fact that I'm presenting to a formal group of people. I'm in that picture. I cut myself out. I didn't want to push back. Okay, so looking at the numbers, what do we know? We know that 94% of Americans favor the legalization of marijuana. We know that 66% of Americans think that marijuana should be legal in general. That's Gallup poll. 92% of pediatric oncology providers in Illinois, Massachusetts, and Washington said they would help children with cancer get medical marijuana. That's from the Journal of Pediatrics. Yet, as I mentioned, whoops, wrong button. How do I get this back up there? There we go. $165 million was saved. I love this one. $165 million was saved in Medicare prescriptions in 2013 by states that legalized medical marijuana. That's from Health Affairs. Those of you who know journalists know Health Affairs is a very prestigious, juried publication in health policy. 44% of patients with severe type of epilepsy were significantly helped, there's an error here, by marijuana-based drug. That's just dictation didn't work. That's out of the Lancet, and 64% reduction in opioid use was seen in patients using medical marijuana for chronic pain. You would think with this type of data that there would be a sea change in the way we're approaching marijuana. And indeed, there have been some winds of change. You may recognize this picture. These are the senators who are supporting a bill to deschedule marijuana, make it at least a Schedule II drug. And you may notice 2 presidential candidates in that picture, Kirsten Gillibrand and Cory Booker. The biggest problem, as you've heard me say throughout, has been that we don't have really good research on this because we can't research it. There is a desperate need for good research. Thankfully, the first really good research has been done. It's done by the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. Used to be the Academy of Medicine. The health effects of cannabis and cannabinoids. And their findings, I want to be honest, their findings are very small because they only would say, they have over 100 findings, but the real definitive findings are only 4 or 5 because they would only talk about what they could show with significant data support at a high level. So these are their findings. Medical marijuana has a clear use in chemotherapy, especially with nausea and vomiting, chronic pain, and spasticity, particularly as it's related to MS. They said medical marijuana is problematic in its use in pregnancy. This should be no surprise. Don't drive and operate heavy machinery when you're on marijuana. Although I do say you won't be speeding down the parkway, but you'll be the one driving 15 miles an hour eating nachos, but okay. And lastly, there is strong evidence, and I make a big point of this. There's a strong evidence that adolescent chronic use can impair academic achievement. There's also a strong indicator that chronic adolescent use can be a gateway. So there's more experimentation when you have that in adolescence. Doesn't appear to be evidence of that in adults, but there is with adolescents. There's other resources. Thomas Jefferson has the Lambert Center that's working on templates for providers. There's even, which thanks to Dr. Farmer, I learned about, that's an app that can be used by physicians to find the right dosage. And I would mention here, I didn't have a slide on it. There's a group, a website called Leafly, Leafly, which is a very good resource in terms of strains that you can use and so forth. So let me address one problem. Legalized pot does have a downside for medical patients. Let me tell you what happens. As recreational pot comes into the environment, into the marketplace, why would you go to a doctor and get a prescription that you have to pay for when you can go to the marketplace and buy it over the counter? You can buy the same thing over the counter. So people stop using the medicinal dispensaries and go to the recreational dispensaries. And I traveled and saw this happen in Colorado. I think that's tragic. There's a couple things that happen there. One is nobody gets rich making low-dose vodka. So what they do is they up the THC. So we looked, I just checked this, I was sitting in the audience earlier, what's the highest dose THC, and I found one that's 42% THC. Well, 30% is rocket fuel. So you get an idea of what you're getting when you get a 48% THC. Very dangerous, I think. Now we're moving to not a neutral drug, we're moving to a dangerous drug. And the second piece is that they squeeze the medicinal market out of the marketplace before physicians get on board. And I'm eager to see what happens when physicians get on board. So we set up CIRI, which is the Cannabis Education and Research Institute. And its job really is to educate not only physicians, but the public and legislators in particular. Do a lot of work on the legislative side. Advocacy, our real advocacy is to prevent people from getting into trouble with this. And certainly doing bench research, really good, solid research in this medication. Right now, we're using the PCORI, Patient-Centered Outcome Research Institute designs, because that's all that's available to us. You can't do double blinds and everything else under the current rules. We're starting a project at Drexel. We just approved, well, I approved, it'll be approved by our board this week. Dr. Vez's wife, Elizabeth, is leading that charge for us. And of course, near and dear to my heart are the issues of quality. And what's the quality of the product and what's the quality of the advice that these people get. I had a couple quotes here to end on. That's just saying we should discuss this. I love this quote from Thomas Jefferson. If the people let the government decide what foods they eat and what medicines they take, their bodies will soon be in as sorry a state as are the souls of those who live under tyranny. Direct quote from Thomas Jefferson. But my favorite quote in this market is from the father of our country, who said, "Make the most you can of the Indian hemp seed and sow it everywhere." So we took his advice. If you see me afterwards, or if you go on our website, just Compassionate Care Foundation, we have handouts, which we just printed, so that's why I couldn't bring them today, but you can get them, on the methods of cannabis consumption, new patient beginner's guide to cannabis consumption, appropriate dosing guidelines, and that's our report, our patient advocacy report, that tells the tale of what's happened to some of the patients you've seen. And you'll see the Jackie and Myra and the ones I talked about, John, on our website. If you want to bring issues and ask questions, that's me. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
that, any questions for Dave?
Yeah. We're giving her a mic.
Do you do anything with CBD oils?
Yes. You're not going to like my answer, I don't think. CBD, the evidence is that CBD does not work except in the presence of THC. THC is acting almost, I don't want to get into chemistry with you, but it's acting as a catalyst. It's not entering into the reaction, but it's necessary for the reaction. So most of the evidence, the scientific evidence is to get an effect with pure CBD oil, you'd have to bathe in it. You know, it's really high concentrations. People are marketing CBD oil, and you can buy it in the drugstore and everything else, because it has less than 0.1% THC, and it therefore doesn't violate the Drug Enforcement Act. And that's why it's done. We just got our extraction permit, so we'll be extracting CBD oil, which has a little bit of THC in it. We have both at Compassionate Care, we have both the highest THC, because we have a lot of cancer patients, end-stage patients, and we have the lowest THC, because we have the most pediatric patients as well. And we'll be using that in CBD.
So what is your lowest in THC? What milligrams?
It's in percentages, and it's less than 1%.
Okay.
It's less than
So you can take that and go to work?
Yeah.
Because it's so
If you
low.
look at THC levels, 15% is like the top of the light side, and if you're up in 30%, you're really in what I call rocket fuel.
Yeah.
You know, that's pretty strong stuff. If you're in 48%, you may not have a parachute back down again. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My question is how you would use it,
Okay.
the smoking of it,
Yeah.
and the negative effects that has on our lungs and what have you. Do you have any research on that?
I do. But I won't, let me see if I can find it here. I told you earlier about this report, and they actually addressed that, and I was very proud of them that they did that. That's this report. One more time. No, that's one more time. There we go. This report actually does talk about the effects on the lungs. And I was disappointed. Let me answer your question two ways. They did not find any link to the types of problems you get from smoking a cigarette with marijuana. They did find some asthmatic complications. You can read the details pretty clearly in there. But they did find when it's chronically used that there can be those implications. But what I want to say, we have a physician on my board of directors, and he says people are increasingly smoking the oils in a vape pipe. They're putting it in a vape pipe and inhaling the oils. If they have respiratory issues, they're getting a lot of oil in that vapor, and that has a deleterious effect on the lungs. That is not in that report, but Dr. Howard on our board is becoming quite outspoken on it. The biggest thing this pushes for, at least they addressed it, and it is a problem with the physicians who will say, we're not going to prescribe something that you smoke. I would tell new users now I've never used marijuana, so I'm not a connoisseur, but I know that our counselors tell people to start with vaping, with a vaporizer, that it's a lot easier, it's less harsh on the body, but its effect is immediate. Because what people love, they love the edibles. So they'll take an edible, but the edibles are going through the liver, and it takes a longer time for the body to process it. So what happens is you take one, you say, boy, I tried this and I got an immediate effect. And then they try an edible, like a blueberry, those little blueberries that are infused with cannabis, they're about 5% THC. So they try it, and they say, boy, I have no effect. They take another one, no effect. They take another one, no effect. They take another one, they're leaving Philadelphia International Airport without a plane. You know, and as much as we laugh about it, this can be very scary. A lot of people end up in emergency rooms and they quote marijuana overdose. There isn't much a doctor can do for somebody that has too much marijuana. They just got to come down. They hydrate them and put them in a dark room so the stimulation's not making them nuts, and they'll come down. But that seems to be what the case is. The edibles are much more dangerous, in my opinion.
And also like with the vapor being so new.
Yeah.
We're beginning to get those comments now of these negative effects and how our youngsters and our teenagers are kind of being pulled in to this cool thing that they're doing when in fact it's extremely unhealthy.
I think you're right, and I reiterate what I said about adolescent use too. Unless there's a medical condition, and I've shown you pictures of young children, but there has to be a medical advantage, which, by the way, the physicians in the room would tell you is true of any drug. All drugs are toxic. You should be using them if they're going to help you, and if you don't take them recreationally, in my view.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, which would you say is like the best, like,
Sour
way?
banana. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, yeah, I have a card, so I use medical marijuana, and I know my mom's always like, you should do the vapor, stop like smoking the plant, and I'm like, but the water vapor is harsher on my lungs.
Okay.
So, what do you suggest is the like, which one do you think is more harmful?
Out of what are my choices?
Like regularly smoking.
Smoking a joint versus vaping?
Yeah,
Vaping's a lot less intrusive.
it is.
It is a lot less intrusive
Okay.
than smoking the other. The other is, it's hot, it's more hot heat, it's more concentrated. The effect of the medication is no different, but the effect on the lungs is, and that's in this report. You can read that report. They looked at it scientifically. I'm just reporting what our patients tell us.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Good to go? Good. Oh, yeah, Jill?
No, that's fine. So I really appreciate the fact that as we're starting to look at research and as medical marijuana is coming on the scene, it's highly popular. There's lots of people who may or may not have a lot of background in understanding what they're using. As even in the medical community, I think, you know, I mean, I'm a nurse, but struggling with where we're at. So I'm kind of mixed in my feelings about medical marijuana. I appreciate the statement on pregnancy, because just like, you know, a number of years ago, a couple decades ago, we're talking about fetal alcohol syndrome.
Sure.
We really don't know the effects, and with our younger population and these kids using it more, that's a serious concern that I have. And also the long-term usage, like how does that affect cognitively on patients? So when you're talking research, are you aware of trying to set up studies? I know as a class 1 med, we have an issue here, but it's trying to set up studies to really look at, because anecdotally, we know that these chronic pothead folks from years and years ago often have early cognitive decline and or more serious mental health diagnoses like schizophrenia and things like that. So what is the background? Do you have any more information on that?
I hate to go back to the same touchstone, but if you read this report is almost 500 pages long. And it's very, very detailed. It's available for free online. And if you read the report, and it's well organized, you don't have to read all 500 pages. It's very well organized and well indexed, and the recommendations are clear. They really took a very, very jaundiced eye view of most of the data to this point. It's a good study, but there needs to be more. We need to be able to compare. Right now, it's still outcome research. It's just talking and looking at clinical results. And I told you I've got less than 3% of the doctors in New Jersey participating. I need docs in so we can start to track what their patients are doing. Once I can start to do that, we can start to look at what they're experiencing. For example, you saw that in nerve pain, sour banana sherbet was the one of choice. That's because of THC levels. And what can we say is happening else to that patient? We need to comprehensively, which I believe is what you're asking about. We need to comprehensively look at what's going on with that patient more than, is this relieving their symptom, their presenting symptom? Their presenting symptom may be, I can't sleep. Well, sour banana is helping them sleep, but is it doing damage somewhere else? And they tried to address that. They were very outspoken with young people and with pregnancy because they thought the data was that clear. So that you can look at their data. Syria is looking at doing some really, starting to gather this information from patients and then going to doctors and saying, why aren't you helping us with this? Yes, sir.
How do I know that the doctor I go to knows what to do with marijuana?
You don't. Most of them don't know what to do.
So, I mean, this seems to me a very serious problem. If
It
the
is a-
doctor,
it-
if the
it is a-
doctor doesn't know what to do with it,
It is a problem, but let me push back just a little. Marijuana doesn't appear, and this study reinforced that, doesn't appear to be addictive, doesn't appear to allow you to overdose. So what do we know about it? Anything clinically? We ask our patients, what's the experience? Does it mitigate their symptoms? What else is going on? And we track other things that are going on. Doctors, for example, in cancer care, drawing on my previous experience as a regulator, in cancer care, almost 70% of drugs are used off-label. There's no real clinical double-blind studies. The doctor is clinically approaching the patient, trying something where he thinks the risk is minimal, given the benefit, and monitoring the patient to see what the result is. There's the same opportunity with cannabis. I am not a fan of recreational. I'm not a fan of this uncontrolled, let's all go get high. I don't think that's helpful, and I don't think it's helpful medically either. But I do think that if I can educate clinicians to clinically, and both physicians and the nursing profession, to start to monitor what's happening with that patient and seeing if there is a positive change. The examples I showed you were life-changing for those people. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, I don't want to walk away from a beneficial substance, actually one of the oldest medicinal substances we know of, just because we're fearful of it because Richard Dixon didn't like it when they first scheduled it as heroin.
it just strikes me that the physicians need some sort of training or some sort of workshop or something to deal with the
Your lips to
situation.
God's ear. That's what we're trying to do.
And and I can speak to that a little bit. There are, Dr. Farmer in our group, we heard from yesterday, she prescribes it, and she still says galley shots. I mean, Jill's probably one of the most, she's wonderful, but Jill's not just Macaulay from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I mean, but she sees the benefit of her patients, and she doesn't want to deny them. So there are
My issue is not.
no,
Yes or
but
no.
let me finish. So there are training. You can't just say I'm going to start prescribing. You have to go through certain types of education. It's minimal. To your point, I'm agreeing with you. I mean, to your point, it is. What we need as physicians are places. I mean, I have my patients who ask about CBD oil. The only thing that I can tell them is I have a lot of other patients. My colleagues have patients that it helps, and some of them go down to South Street. They go to these shops. What works and what doesn't. Like, that's okay for oil to a degree. What we need as physicians is to be able to say, this is a trusted place that you can go, that whatever you're getting, you know what you're getting. Now, to your point, and I think to Dave's point, how many people here have used for pain, neurotic? Almost everybody in this room, right? It's a seizure medication. It's got 5 different indications that we use off-label all the time. I mean, some of the chemotherapeutic agents, we don't even know how they work. We know that they kill a lot of normal tissue. So that's where the problem is being able to first do no harm, right? Make sure that there's a minimal risk. But what you're bringing up is exactly what you're correct. It's the point that we need to have a better understanding of what we're giving, who to give it to, and to be able to monitor it. It's
Just
very-
backing up what Dr. Vez is saying, it's very important that you control quality. People say, well, why buy it from a dispensary when I can buy it on the street and it's less expensive? In New Jersey, we can use no pesticides at all. The Department of Health shows up once a week, unannounced, walks into my 80,000 square feet of warehouse, clips a plant, which is barcoded, takes it back, tests it. If there's anything in there that's not what we said, percent THC, CBD, if there's any pesticide, they shut us down until we rectify it. We've never had a violation, knock on wood. But I think if you're going to think about this as a medicine, you got to run it like a medicine. You can't have it be at Joe's Bar and Grill. You go up and wink twice at the bartender and they give it to you under the table. That's dangerous. And the biggest reason it's dangerous is getting these high THC strains is difficult. And people want to get you high fast because that's what you buy on the street. So they put other bath salts and other stuff in it that are really dangerous, really do harm. Yes, ma'am.
In your practice, I don't know if you have any idea, but are you getting patient feedback on like people with headaches and what percentage strains they're using? I've heard from another pain management practitioner that the higher THC to CBD was actually causing more headaches.
Yeah.
So
we are actually looking at that. One of the more recent additions that I showed you on that slide back there was migraines. And we are seeing success with it. And I actually was the one that said to my people, are we sure? Because they started out, because they were describing pain, they started out with high THC. And I said, I wonder if that's causative. And we are finding, this is just clinical observation, we're finding that lower THC is working better. So that's been our experience. There's no science to that other than patient-reported outcome. But we are seeing it with migraines. It is, some people have bad migraines and they're shocked when they find that this helps them. I was pleased that it helped them, but we're finding a little more success with the lower THC levels.
Is there, in the state of New Jersey anyway, when somebody's a physician is allowed to prescribe medication they have, is there any type of, at the state level, where I personally don't have a license to do that, but let's say I did, if I prescribe to my patient, is there some type of follow-up or data that gets collected by the state?
No.
Yeah.
So that's what what Siri is implementing. But the state doesn't collect it.
Because that data is important, not just for regulatory, that somebody's not, just kind of on the corner prescribing, but also for that question of getting follow-up, of tracking outcomes. Is this helping? Is it not helping? What patient population? That's the next step that we have to get.
Well, and I believe it's what will get, I don't believe doctors are closed-minded. I don't believe that they're sitting out there and saying, a pox on all you have to. I really don't think they are. I think that what they're saying is, I don't want to prescribe snake oil for somebody when I don't know what it's going to do. So I believe as we can start to give them data and say, doctor, would you like to participate with us as we look at this? Would you contribute your patients to be identified to a database that we can start to really look at what people are describing as outcomes? We're putting in a registry program through Siri that will allow people to use a cell phone and give their symptoms throughout the day, because there's another worry of what's happening over time. But nobody's doing that, and that's what it's going to take to really look at this. And I believe that will be persuasive to physicians. What's not persuasive to physicians is I feel better because of this. Shades of Laetrile. You can't do that.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, people that are in chronic pain, especially with CBD oil, I have 80-year-old patients that use it for their knee and whatever, and they swear by it. And I'm like, that's great. I've yet to see any of my colleagues in our group see any adverse effect from CBD oil.
Well, there's no adverse effect.
Yeah,
But it's pretty much placebo effect.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
You know what? It's a lot better than OxyContin.
Yeah, you aren't kidding. Well, you saw my earlier slide, 58% trading off opioids. That's significant, man.
Well, this isn't really a question, but really an answer to what you asked. That I'm a qualifying patient in the state of Illinois, and there's actually a prompt in my registry that asks me if I prefer to share my purchase history with my doctor, and I checked yes because it was actually a thorough conversation when she had signed my paperwork that I recreationally used as through high school, but as a singer, smoking was a habit that I really wanted to break. And so every time I do go to purchase, she gets a history. I keep a diary of the certain percentages that scare me, and stuff I don't like, and the stuff I do like. So even though it's not required, I know that it's kind of helping me to help her in that way. And so I don't know if it's like that in any other state, but I preferred that relationship with her.
No, our state's been slow on that. That's why Syri's trying to do it on their own, because the state hasn't. Well, we have a new commissioner coming in.
Dave was a past commissioner of health in the state of New Jersey as well, so he's a politician as well. He's a recovering politician.
Recovering. Marijuana can help you with that.
I've known you for probably almost 20 years now, and if you told me 5 years ago that you would be advocating for marijuana, anybody said I'd be, no way.
No, I got in kicking and screaming. I was doing a friend a favor. I thought I'd be on his board. And I ended up having to run it because it didn't go well with him. Yeah, and what really happened is I started to see the results. I mean, I thought, well, this is the next big fad. And I wasn't opposed to it, but if you see some of the PTSD stuff we're seeing and so forth, it's really, and you meet Jackie and you meet Myra, it knocks you, Dave and Ashton Mitchell will knock your socks off.
How many people in this room use, we get this actually, but either THC in any form or CBD oil? How many of you don't want to try it or would never try it? Yeah, and there's,
Yeah.
how many would never try it or don't want to try it? You are going to try it. So,
Yeah.
I think that it's a litmus of, it's easy to be on sit there and criticize, but if you're in chronic pain and you're having these problems and there's scooping out there, it's our job as physicians and your job as legislators and monitoring this to be able to make sure that we're evaluating it, making sure it's safe, and that there's some, to your point, that there's some type of control in this.
Right. But because exactly what you say, Earl, because of the chronic pain patient who will do anything to relieve the pain, you're not going to get, you run the risk of getting snake oil and bad stuff because they'll try anything. We've been through. Slowly.
Importance of responding to pain and in an irresponsible manner. And look what we're stuck with.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's what we're hoping to change.
I have a question. What if you're in a professional job, if you're an NP or if you're a teacher and you want to go, different patients have asked me questions all week, and you want to go on CBD. Now, I thought CBD would be perfectly acceptable if they did a blood test on this person. Is that not the case in all states, or is it?
I'm not sure I understand your
Okay,
question.
somebody's,
Bottom line is if my knee hurts and I'm slapping CBD oil on it, I'm going to do it.
or the drops under your tongue.
Yeah, I mean, is there
Well, if you're putting drops under your tongue and it has THC in it and you're going in for surgery, it's a problem.
so I guess
You got to know what you're using. See, you have CBD oils which have THC in it, and you have some CBD oil that does not.
Right.
But if you're getting anything with THC in it, THC is a psychoactive substance, and it interacts with other medications. So you want to tell Dr. Vez if you're going in for brain surgery if you're taking THC.
No, but they're worried about the jobs with testing. If
Oh.
they're just taking CBD,
Yeah.
plain, no THC under
Yeah.
their tongue, that should not be an issue, correct?
Well, that's correct. But you got to ask yourself whether you have to disclose. You're getting into employment law. In New Jersey, we have protection from you if you're a registered card holder for marijuana. You're protected from, your employer can still test, but you're protected from a job action if you're a legitimate Usually the same way as if you were taking Oxycontin or some other medication. So you got to know the law. How people get caught in this, just being candid, I'm not a lawyer either, but the way you get caught in this is you lie about it. You say you're not when you are, and you get zapped in the lie. You got to know what the law says. Got a question with this young lady right here.
How would you go about finding a doctor to help you try medical marijuana in whatever form?
Well, I give 2 bits of advice on that. Used to be the department required every doctor who was registered with the program to be on a website. The doctors hated that. It was the biggest reason we didn't grow the number of doctors, because they were very happy to prescribe it for their own patients, but they didn't want the line out the door for people who wanted to get a prescription. So we couldn't get doctors signed up. It was a terrible problem. Now they don't require the website. Problem is it makes it difficult for a patient. You can call the department, and the department will tell you. That's not the way to do it. I would find a dispensary near you and ask them. They all have a list of docs, and they will tell you that this is the doc. And the doctor, in New Jersey law, the doctor has to have a bona fide patient relationship with you. Many of the advocates don't like that. I really like that. I think the doctor can't just say, oh yeah.
Well, another, what I would recommend is whatever state you're in, asking your physician, because my patients ask me, and I don't personally prescribe it, but I know the doctors that I trust that are, and that are legitimate, and that they're doing it for the right reason, and then that's the best way to do it.
I want to add one thing to what Errol said, because it's a very important point. Is if you're under care of a doctor, let's say you're under a care for some debilitating problem that's causing you pain or difficulty, or cancer, let's say, one of these issues, you should talk to your doctor if you're thinking of cannabis. And then you should ensure, if that doctor, many of them don't prescribe, you should go to the doctor who does prescribe, and the doctor should talk to each other about your case. This is no different than any other type of case where your physician is referring you to another physician or nurse practitioner now in New Jersey law, saying, can you help this patient, and monitor that aspect of their care? That's completely appropriate. Going in and I've had patients that don't tell their doctor who's treating them. The doctor is thinking everything's going great, and it's not going great. You're just high. So you want to share the information. Yeah.
I think the whole point of this is, and I think you stated this earlier, it has to be considered a medication.
It is a medication.
It's just like anything else. And, we've gone the whole route of the opioids, and it's been a disaster for a lot of people. Not everybody, but I think the whole point is just, it's a medication, treat it as a medication, and I think it will, in the long run, I think it'll be very beneficial.
I think you're right. And I think piggybacking on what this gentleman said is we're finally starting to come to grips with pain and starting to say pain matters. And people will do almost anything when they're in serious pain. And so it's very important when you have something that makes people feel better that you winnow out what's placebo effect, what's real, what's not real. Very important that you do that. So I agree with his comments completely. The problem here is the opioid epidemic is really a result of people doing anything they can to stop pain.
I have more of a question for you. And wondering, I know there's no money and stuff like this, but being...
Actually, there's a lot of money in it. It's
Well,
just the kind of who it's going to.
And what I'm talking about, being more proactive as a patient community, I know there's the Chiari database that you guys are collecting data. I'm wondering if we get, if the laws change where it's no longer Schedule I drug, if somehow we could be proactive as a Chiari community
And start collecting data in the Chiari database for physicians to be able to say, okay, here is a trend or types of marijuana that we know are beneficial in this community.
That's an awesome idea. And as this was going on, I was thinking about this, all of you in the audience and the people who've been here for the last 3 days, the network that you all have nationally, actually internationally, is huge and powerful. And that kind of collective voice is much better, it's more accurate and stronger than anything we can do as physicians and people in our office and this and that, people going out to pay for it. So I think that's a great idea, and I think that's exactly where we need to start. And, you know, most Chiari patients, you know, from my talk, 70% that's presenting and is a present symptom is pain. So maybe we can work with Patrice with figuring out a way to collect data, you know, even just sending out questionnaires to all patients. Online poll, exactly.
We could do like a survey monkey.
Exactly. I think it's a great idea, yeah.
And we'd love to help. Syria,
Help with the questions.
Syria will help compile. I mean, you'll have access to whatever we have. Yeah.
Great idea.
With some of my medications, thank you. I go to my pharmacist and I have a 30-day supply, and I am advised as to how to use that medication.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in place for this medical marijuana card where there is that suggested use that cannot be exceeded for somebody who might
The
get a little bit
states,
too happy?
the states differ. In New Jersey, up until last week, you could only get 2 ounces a month. That was just expanded to, I just looked it up, because they just changed it. It was expanded to 4 ounces now, and it's unlimited if you're terminally ill. But there's a limitation on how much you can get at any given time. Now, you can use 2 ounces in 2 days, and you'd have a problem, you know. So you got to spread that out a little bit. But
The question, I think, was as far as like, you know, I have pain, how much do I take?
oh, the guidelines. I'm sorry, I did skip
Well,
the.
kind of on a, like, say I decide to take this route, and my doctor is supportive, which she is, and I would want to know that I'm going to use this as a medicine, as I do anything else, and stay within the guidelines that are going to be in my best interest.
They're
and
done
not just-
locally. We put them out there because these are in front, you can't see it, but the proper dosing guide is in the back, and we give all our patients a proper dosing guide, because very often the physicians don't know. And so this has been based on what we've seen.
So the dispensary is giving that information, not
Right.
so much the doctor basing it on his or her patient
Right.
in front of him.
Because the doctor probably doesn't know.
Yeah,
Okay,
I guarantee
thank
the doctor doesn't know.
I have a card, and when I go to the dispensary, when you first go, you can ask, they'll tell you, do you want a consultation? Which is with like kind of a doctor, and they'll talk to you and be like, okay, what are your issues? Okay, this is what kind of strains I think will help you. So they'll like sit down with you and talk to you and give you all of that information. And every time like I go into the dispensary and I'm like, look, I'm having this, this, and this, but I don't want anything that can give me anxiety, because I know I have a tendency to have that reaction. And they are educated in those things, and they go, okay, they look at their menu, they have a whole menu, and they go, okay, these are the 4 best strains that you could try. And you want to do this one, like I had a really nicely, that's like, what medications are you on? And I'm like, I'm on this, this, and this. She's like, okay, this will be a great strain for nighttime, but don't use it too much with your Flexeril because it can be too sedating. So they will tell you and help you and work with you and really explain how to use it and when you should use it and things like that. You're welcome.
We'll have one more last question here, and then we'll get,
Is it less effective if you use it on an irregular basis? Like, say if you're on medication and for the most part it's controlling your pain, but then you have these bad days and you use it then. Is it less effective?
Not sure I understand your question. So you're on a non-cannabis based medication of some
I know,
kind,
I don't think I'm putting.
and then you're having a day when it's a little bit, can it take the edge off? Is that the question?
Right, like weather really affects me.
Yeah.
and can be just debilitating.
That's the way it's very often used. It's very often used because somebody can take it. It doesn't really interact with a lot of stuff, so you can add and take the edge off. The only warning I'd give you is what I said earlier: tell your doctor, because I'm not an expert on the United States pharmacopoeia and what you could be taking in your medications and their reactions. So you want to be sure you know. But using it episodically is what a lot of people do. Say, I'm just having a bad time. It's a lot better doing that than Klonopin, which a lot of people use episodically for anxiety, for example.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we're gonna, Dave, come answer questions, and I think he has some information to after. What I want to do is just get to our, Dave, that was great.
Yeah, thank you.